just another night shift at Joe's Pizza, or so I thought. The order came in around 10 p.m., a large pepperoni and mushroom to 42 Willow Street. Nothing unusual, right? Wrong. As I pulled up to the address, my headlights illuminated a Victorian-style house that seemed frozen in time. The paint was peeling, and the porch creaked under my feet as I approached the door. I knocked, my knuckles barely grazing the wood before it swung open. The woman who answered was different. Her gray hair was wild, sticking out in all directions, and her eyes darted around like she was expecting someone to jump out at any moment. Come in, she urged, her bony fingers wrapping around my wrist. Put it in the dining room, dear. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to drop the pizza and run, but I needed this job. So I stepped inside. The house smelled musty, like old books and mothballs. As the woman led me through a narrow hallway, I noticed something odd. Shelves lined the walls, floor to ceiling, and on every shelf sat dolls, hundreds of them. Porcelain faces with glassy eyes stared at me as I passed. I could have sworn I saw one blink. The dining room was just as unsettling as the rest of the house. A long table dominated the space, set for a dinner party that clearly hadn't happened in decades. More dolls sat in the chairs, their lifeless eyes fixed on the empty plates before them. I placed the pizza box on the table, eager to leave. As I turned to go, I heard it. A whisper, so faint I almost missed it. Stay with us. I whipped around, but the room was empty save for the dolls. The woman who'd let me in was nowhere to be seen. My heart raced as I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I made my way back to the hallway, but something was different. The dolls on the shelves had moved, I was sure of it. Where they had been facing forward before, they were now all turned towards me, their painted smiles suddenly seeming sinister. Hello? I called out, my voice shaking. Ma'am, I need to get going now. No response, just the oppressive silence of the house and the feeling of 100 glass eyes watching my every move. I quickened my pace, nearly running towards the front door. As I reached for the handle, I heard it again. This time it wasn't just one voice, but many. A chorus of childlike whispers, all saying my name. Jason, Jason, stay and play with us, Jason. I yanked the door open, ready to bolt, but froze in my tracks. The porch, the street, my car, they were all gone. Instead, I was staring into an endless void of darkness. Panic gripped me as I slammed the door shut, my breath coming in short gasps. There's no leaving now, Jason. The old woman's voice came from behind me, making me jump. She stood at the end of the hallway, a doll cradled in her arms. They've chosen you, isn't it wonderful? I backed away, pressing myself against the door. What do you mean? Who's chosen me? She smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. The dolls, of course. They get so lonely, you see. They need new friends to play with. As she spoke, I heard a rustling sound. To my horror, I saw the dolls on the shelves begin to move. Not just turning their heads, but climbing down, their tiny porcelain limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. This isn't real, I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. This can't be real. But when I opened them, the dolls were closer. Dozens of them surrounding me, their painted eyes now alive with an eerie light. I felt tiny hands grabbing at my clothes, my legs trying to pull me down. Don't fight it, Jason, the old woman cooed. They just want to play, forever and ever. I screamed, kicking and thrashing, but there were too many. As I fell to the floor, overwhelmed by the mass of dolls, I saw my hand. To my terror, my fingers were turning glossy, becoming jointed like a doll's. I don't know how long I struggled. Time seemed to lose all meaning in that nightmarish house. But gradually, I felt my resistance weakening. The doll's whispers grew louder, more insistent, drowning out my own thoughts. Join us, Jason. Be our friend. Stay and play forever. My body felt strange, stiff. I managed to catch a glimpse of myself in a dusty mirror on the wall. My skin was smooth and shiny, my eyes glassy and unblinking. I was becoming one of them. In a last, desperate attempt, I called out to the old woman. Please, let me go. I won't tell anyone about this, I swear. She appeared before me, looking down with what seemed like pity. Oh, Jason, don't you understand? This is a gift. You'll never be alone again. You'll never grow old, never die. Isn't that what everyone wants? As she spoke, I felt the last of my humanity slipping away. My thoughts became simpler, childlike. The fear was fading, replaced by an odd sense of belonging. The other dolls no longer seemed scary, but like friends I'd known all my life. That's it, the woman encouraged. Let go. Become who you were meant to be. With my last human thought, I wondered about my family, my friends. Would anyone come looking for me? Would they find this house of horrors? Or would I simply vanish, another unsolved missing persons case? Days passed, or maybe years. It's hard to tell when you're a doll. I sit on my shelf watching the old woman go about her business. Sometimes she brings in new dolls, lost travelers, delivery people, curious kids who wandered too close to the house. I want to warn them, but all I can do is whisper their names, inviting them to join us. The house has become my world. I know every crack in the walls, every creaky floorboard. The other dolls are my constant companions. We don't speak, not really, but we communicate in our own way. Subtle movements, the blink of an eye, the twitch of a porcelain finger. Sometimes I remember my old life, the pizza shop, my apartment, my dog. But those memories feel distant, like a dream I once had. This is my reality now, eternal, unchanging, trapped in a child's body with an adult's mind. The old woman is aging. I've watched her hair turn from gray to white, her movements becoming slower and more painful. I wonder what will happen when she's gone. Will we be left here, frozen forever? Or will someone else take her place, continuing this cycle of horror? As I ponder this, I hear a sound that sends a thrill through my rigid body. A knock at the door, a new visitor, a potential friend. Despite myself, I feel excitement bubbling up inside me. After all, misery loves company, and I've been miserable for oh so long. I turn my head towards the door, my painted smile widening just a fraction. Welcome to our home, new friend. Won't you stay and play with us? Forever and ever and ever. I've been a delivery driver for years, but nothing could have prepared me for that fateful night. It was a crisp autumn evening when I received an unusual order, a massive shipment of meat to be delivered to a remote cabin deep in the woods. The request seemed odd, but who was I to question a customer's needs? As I navigated the winding dirt road, the dense forest seemed to close in around me. The branches of leafless trees clawed at my truck, as if trying to warn me away. I should have listened to that primal fear rising in my gut, but I pressed on. Finally, I arrived at the cabin. It was a decrepit structure, barely visible in the moonlight. The porch creaked ominously as I approached, my arms laden with heavy boxes. I knocked, and the door swung open with an eerie groan. The man who greeted me was tall and gaunt, his skin pale as death, but it was his eyes that truly unsettled me. They gleamed with an unnatural hunger that sent shivers down my spine. He smiled, revealing yellowed teeth, and invited me inside to drop off the delivery. Against my better judgment, I entered. The cabin's interior was sparse, save for a few odd pieces of furniture and some strange, rusted tools hanging on the walls. As I set down the boxes, the man's gaze never left me. He licked his lips, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was sizing me up like a piece of meat. "Quite a large order you've got here," I remarked, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. The man's smile widened, and he replied in a raspy voice, "Oh yes, I have a special appetite." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I hurriedly finished unloading the boxes, eager to leave this unsettling place. As I turned to go, the man blocked my path. "Won't you stay for dinner?" he asked, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "I insist." My heart raced as I stammered out an excuse about more deliveries to make. The man's face fell, disappointment etched in his gaunt features. "Such a shame," he muttered. "You look delicious." I practically ran back to my truck, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As I was about to drive away, something caught my eye through the cabin's kitchen window. The man was unpacking the meat, but instead of storing it in a fridge, he was laying it out on a large, stained table. That's when I saw them. An array of sharp, gleaming butcher tools hanging on the wall. My blood ran cold as the realization hit me. The meat I had delivered might not have been the only thing on his menu tonight. I slammed on the gas, my tires spinning in the dirt as I sped away from that hellish place. The man's laughter echoed through the woods, following me like a curse. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped becoming his next meal. For days after that nightmarish encounter, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's hungry gaze and those horrifying butcher tools. I debated whether to report what I'd seen to the police, but what could I tell them? That I suspected a customer of being a cannibal based on a creepy vibe and some kitchen utensils. A week passed, and I was just starting to convince myself that I had imagined the whole thing when I received another delivery request. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the address. It was the same isolated cabin. I knew I should refuse the job, but a morbid curiosity gnawed at me. I had to know if my suspicions were true. This time, I came prepared. I tucked a small camera into my jacket pocket, determined to gather evidence if needed. As I approached the cabin, an oppressive silence hung in the air. No birds chirped, no insects buzzed. It was as if nature itself shunned this place. The man answered the door, his hungry eyes lighting up when he saw me. "You've returned," he said, his voice dripping with anticipation. "I knew you would." I tried to keep my composure as I brought in the boxes, surreptitiously activating the camera. The cabin seemed different this time. There was a sickly sweet odor in the air, and dark stains marred the floorboards. As I set down the last box, the man placed a hand on my shoulder. His touch was ice cold, and I couldn't suppress a shudder. "Stay for dinner," he said. It wasn't a request this time, but a command. My mind raced, searching for a way out. I mumbled something about needing to use the bathroom and quickly made my way down the hall, hoping to find an escape route. Instead, what I discovered made my blood run cold. I pushed open a door and found myself in what could only be described as a butcher's nightmare. Hooks hung from the ceiling, some still dripping with a dark, viscous liquid. A large freezer hummed in the corner, and I didn't dare imagine what horrors it might contain. But the worst was yet to come. On a blood-stained table lay a half-dissected body, its chest cavity splayed open like a grotesque flower. I stifled a scream, my hand flying to my mouth in horror. "Curious, aren't we?" The man's voice came from behind me, sending icy tendrils of fear down my spine. I spun around to find him blocking the doorway, a wicked-looking cleaver in his hand. "You really shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice filled with mock pity. "But since you're here, why don't you join me for dinner? You'll be the guest of honor." I backed away, my eyes darting around for anything I could use as a weapon. The man advanced, his cleaver glinting in the dim light. In desperation, I grabbed a heavy metal tray from the table and swung it with all my might. The tray connected with his head with a sickening thud. He staggered back, momentarily stunned. I seized the opportunity and shoved past him, running for my life through the cabin and out into the night. I ran faster than I ever had before, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face. I could hear him behind me, his enraged howls echoing through the forest. My lungs burned, but terror propelled me forward. Finally, I reached my truck. My hands shook violently as I tried to insert the key. Just as I heard the man's heavy footsteps approaching, the engine roared to life. I floored the accelerator, tires spinning in the dirt before finding purchase. As I sped down the winding road, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The man stood at the edge of the trees, his cleaver glinting in the moonlight. Even from a distance, I could see the promise of retribution in his eyes. I drove straight to the police station, my story tumbling out in a panicked rush. At first, they were skeptical, but the footage from my hidden camera provided the evidence they needed. A team was dispatched to the cabin immediately. They found the horrors I had described and more. The freezer was full of human remains, and buried in the yard were countless bones, a graveyard of the man's victims. But of the cannibal himself, there was no sign. He had vanished into the night. It's been months since that terrifying encounter, but I still can't shake the feeling that he's out there somewhere, waiting. Every time I make a delivery to a remote location, I wonder, will this be the day he finds me? Will I become the final course in the cannibal's last meal? It was just another night shift at Pete's Pizza, or so I thought. The orders were rolling in as usual, and I was making my rounds across town. Little did I know that this ordinary evening would soon turn into a nightmare that would haunt me forever. Around 10 p.m., an order came in from 42 Elm Street. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed how eerily quiet the neighborhood was. The porch light flickered ominously as I approached the door, pizza in hand. I rang the doorbell, and after a moment, I heard soft footsteps approaching. The door creaked open, and I found myself face to face with a woman who looked strangely familiar. She had long, dark hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through me. Her pale skin almost glowed in the dim porch light. As she smiled at me, I felt an inexplicable chill run down my spine. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting for this all night." I handed her the pizza, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had come over me. As she paid, her cold fingers brushed against mine, and I suppressed a shudder. Something about this woman was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As I turned to leave, the woman called out to me. "Be careful out there," she said, her tone oddly ominous. "You never know what might be lurking in the shadows." I hurried back to my car, glancing over my shoulder as I went. The woman was still standing in the doorway, watching me with that unsettling smile. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The rest of my shift passed uneventfully, but that woman's face kept haunting my thoughts. Why did she seem so familiar? Where had I seen her before? These questions swirled in my mind as I finished up my deliveries and headed home. Exhausted from the long night, I collapsed onto my couch and flicked on the TV, hoping to unwind before bed. As I channel surfed, something caught my eye on the local news. The anchor was talking about a recent tragedy in our town. In a shocking turn of events, local school teacher Sarah Thompson was found dead in her home yesterday, the anchor announced. My blood ran cold as a photo appeared on the screen. It was her, the woman I had delivered pizza to just hours ago. I sat there, frozen in disbelief, as the news report continued. Sarah Thompson, 32, had been discovered by a neighbor after failing to show up for work. The police were treating it as a suspicious death, and they were appealing for any information from the public. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. How could I have delivered pizza to a dead woman? Was I losing my mind? I replayed the encounter in my head, remembering every detail of her face, her voice, her cold touch. It was definitely the same woman, but how was that possible? Unable to sleep, I spent the rest of the night researching Sarah Thompson online. I found her social media profiles, filled with photos of her smiling with friends and family. Each image sent a fresh wave of terror through me as I recognized the woman I had seen just hours ago. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I had to go back to 42 Elm Street. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy, that there was a logical explanation for what had happened. With shaking hands, I got in my car and drove through the quiet morning streets. The house looked different in the daylight, less menacing, but no less mysterious. I parked across the street and watched, my heart pounding in my chest. What was I expecting to see? After an hour of surveillance, I mustered up the courage to approach the house. The porch light was off now, and the windows were dark. I rang the doorbell, holding my breath as I waited. No answer. I knocked, louder this time, but still nothing. Just as I was about to give up, I heard a noise from inside. It was faint but unmistakable, the sound of footsteps. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear more. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine as I heard a voice. Her voice, whispering from the other side. "I told you to be careful," it said, so softly I almost thought I had imagined it. "Now you've seen too much." I stumbled backward, my heart racing. As I retreated to my car, I saw a curtain move in one of the windows. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of a pale face watching me. But it wasn't the woman I had seen last night. It was different, yet somehow the same. The face in the window had the same piercing green eyes, but the features were slightly altered, as if someone had tried to recreate Sarah Thompson's appearance but hadn't quite succeeded. Panic overtook me as I sped away from Elm Street. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was I dealing with a ghost, a doppelganger, or something even more sinister? In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Everywhere I went, I thought I saw her, in crowds, in reflections, always just at the edge of my vision. But when I turned to look, she was gone. I tried to tell the police what I had seen, but they dismissed my story as stress-induced hallucinations. No one believed me, and I began to doubt my own sanity. Was I really losing my mind? I started to notice strange occurrences around my apartment. Objects would move when I wasn't looking, and sometimes I'd wake up to find my furniture rearranged. Once I found a long, dark hair on my pillow, a hair that wasn't mine. The final straw came when I received a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read the message. "You should have listened. Now it's your turn." Attached was a photo that made my heart stop. It was me, asleep in my bed, taken from inside my room. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. Standing over me, with that same eerie smile, was the woman from 42 Elm Street. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't live like this anymore, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every shadow. I decided to confront whatever was haunting me, even if it meant putting myself in danger. That night, I drove back to 42 Elm Street, armed with nothing but a flashlight and my desperate need for answers. The house loomed before me, dark and foreboding. With trembling hands, I approached the front door. To my surprise, it swung open at my touch. The interior was pitch black, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. My flashlight flickered to life, revealing a living room frozen in time. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. It looked as if no one had lived here for years. Suddenly, I heard that familiar whisper behind me. "Welcome home," it said. I spun around, my heart pounding, to find myself face to face with not one but dozens of women. Each one looked almost like Sarah Thompson, but with subtle differences. A constellation of nearly identical faces, all wearing the same eerie smile. As they closed in around me, I realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't about a ghost or a doppelganger. This was something far worse, a force that could replicate and replace people at will. And now, it wanted me. As I write this now, I can hear them outside my door. If you're reading this, beware of familiar faces. You never know who or what might be waiting on the other side.